Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here, got another Master Duel video for you. So it's Dragon Link this time. I don't think I've actually covered Dragon Link yet this season, so I wanted to make sure that we went ahead and did so before season's end. I'm especially interested in covering Dragon Link now because I think this deck is going to get a lot better post-ban list. In fact, a lot of people are kind of forecasting this to be possibly the new top deck of the upcoming meta, again, once we get those ban list changes moving forward, because mostly the fact that, you know, this is the one deck that didn't really get hit at all by the ban list, where pretty much every other top contender for meta decks there, Tier Limit, Sprite, and Branded, all took some pretty significant hits from the ban list. So I think that Dragon Link is very well poised post-ban list, but I'm not convinced necessarily that it's going to be like the #1 top tier 1 deck, at least not at first, or at least not in terms of representation. There's a couple of reasons for that. Honestly, I think the main thing that's holding back Dragon Link from being the #1 deck of the format, maybe even ever, maybe not even just in this meta, is just how complex it is. Dragon Link, I think, among the decks I've played in Master Duel so far, is definitely one of, if not the deck with the highest skill floor. Now, you might have heard me refer to skill ceilings in the past, and that's just how, generally, how far you can take a deck and how good at a particular deck you can get. Dragon Link absolutely has an enormously high skill ceiling, but unlike a lot of decks, it actually has a pretty high skill floor, too. And what I mean by that is that to even pilot this deck, like, you know, competently at a level where you can, like, reasonably get to Master 5, if not 1, you already have to be, like, pretty good at Dragon Link to even, you know, see a decent amount of success with it. And in that regard, I think it's going to end up turning a lot of people off from the deck there. I think that ultimately we'll not see as many people playing Dragon Link as necessarily should be, given the deck's power level in the meta. So is this actually going to be the top deck moving forward? I'm not 100% convinced. Again, and mostly in terms of how many people are playing it. In terms of its power level, I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually the most powerful deck moving forward. I think a lot of what makes Dragon Link particularly complex is that the fact that it plays non-linearly. There is a sort of general play pattern, or like there's kind of a main combo line you can follow if you only open like Starliege Seyfert or access to like one of the baby Chaos Dragons here. Like if you open Seyfert and nothing else, there is a combo line you can kind of follow, but to play your hand optimally, it really depends on what you open. For example, the line where you start with Seyfert searches out both of your field spells, but if you open with one of your 2 field spells, then you no longer need to search it, and that already is going to pretty drastically change what your plays look like. It'll kind of change the point of the combo line that you kind of enter from, so to speak. The number of extenders that you have in hand is also going to pretty greatly affect this, and not just the number, but which extenders you have. If you already open with one of the baby Chaos Dragons, either Wyverburster or Collapserpent, for example, and you have a Chaos Space, you no longer need to use your Chaos Space to go ahead and search one of those out. You can potentially grab a Bystial Lubellion, which will give you access to a Magnmahut, and again, the kind of extenders you have will also affect what plays you make, because if you're not summoning a Bystial monster, it's not really feasible to summon the Baronne, for example. However, once you have access to a Bystial monster, then you can start thinking about working the Baronne into your combo line, and again, just sometimes depending on your hand, you can even summon the Baronne before you start doing the vast majority of your plays, thus protecting them, kind of insulating them from disruption from your opponent there. So we're going to be covering a few different games that show a few different scenarios, like going first, going second, entering the combo line at different points, so on and so forth, and hopefully that'll provide a little bit, at least a little bit of insight into how the deck is played. I want to preface, as I kind of always do with this particular deck whenever I do deck profiles for it, I am not a dedicated Dragon Link player. There are definitely many much better Dragon Link players than me out there. If you're looking particularly for a good Dragon Link player, I definitely recommend Trishula TV. Trish is very, very good at playing this deck, and he has a pretty extensive, I think like 45-minute combo guide that he made as well, so would definitely advise checking that out if you're looking for more in-depth just kind of details, I guess, into how the deck is played. Oh, one thing I do need to cover about the list before I start breaking it down card by card and we look at games here is that I did decide to try out something a little bit different here. Normally, I play the Rokket Synchron in the main deck and the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend in the extra deck. However, I'm trying out the Rokket Caliber over Rokket Synchron, and because we don't have that level 1 tuner, I am not playing the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend here in the extra. I think I'm playing the Chaos Angel instead. But the reason to play Rokket Caliber is because it is a level 4 tuner, so it makes making the Baronne a lot easier. And it also acts as an extender from the hand as well. You can special it directly to a zone that any Dharc Link monster is pointing to. So that can often be very handy, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's 100% better than playing the Rokket Synchron. But again, I just wanted to give it a try and see if it was. So I think the majority of decks are still playing the Rokket Synchron, and after, oh, I'm sorry, I bumped the mic there, sorry about that, and after doing a little bit of testing, I do suspect that the Rokket Synchron is probably just better, but Caliber definitely not a bad choice either, so. You'll also note that my list is exactly 40 cards. That's very much a me thing. I think this deck can not only very easily play above 40 cards, up to 45 even, but it often should, right? Like, in order to include a lot of the tech that is really good in this particular meta, a lot of Dragon Link decks are at 42 or 43 cards. I do think that's probably fine. Well, it's definitely fine, right? Especially for a deck like this. Again, I just particularly like playing 40 cards, which is why I have 40, so I figured I would cover that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and break this list down card by card, and then we'll look at some gameplay. We're on 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and a Joyous Spring, 2 White Dragon Wyverburster, 2 Black Dragon Collapserpent, 2 Rokket Tracer, 1 Rokket Recharger, 3 Starliege Seyfert, 1 Rokket Caliber, 1 Bystial Magnmahut, 3 Bystial Saronir, 1 Bystial Druiswarm, 1 Bystial Baldrake, 1 Absorouter Dragon, 1 Chaos Dragon Levianeer, 3 the Bystial Lubellion, 3 Chaos Space, 1 Dragon Ravine, 1 Boot Sector Launch, 1 Branded Regained, 3 Quick Launch, 2 Call by the Grave, and then 1 Branded Beast. That's going to be our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Borreload Savage Dragon, 1 Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon. We have 1 Baronne de Fleur, we have 1 Chaos Angel, we have 1 Guardragon Pisty, 2 Striker Dragon, 1 Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, 1 Dragunity Knight Romulous, 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Dharc the Dark Charmer Gloomy, 1 Triple Burst Dragon, 1 Knightmare Unicorn, 1 Accesscode Talkder, and then 1 Borrelend Dragon. So, there is our list. Now let's see some gameplay. Alright, for our first duel, we're going to be up against Kashtira. I think we played against a couple of Kashtira lists, if I recall correctly. This is a pure Kashtira list. They are utilizing Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos. I don't think it's right to play both of those at 3, but you could be doing worse things, to be fair. We're actually going to be taking the second turn here. Our opponent's going to start by normalling the Rise Heart and banishing, I believe that was Unicorn? Yes, Unicorn. Before setting 3 cards and then passing. Let's take a look at the 3 cards that got banished off the top of our deck. Maxx, Collapserpent, and Lubellion. So we should be fine. Although, it is definitely important to check for that when you're playing against, like, you know, Kashtira with Rise Heart or Runix, because this deck plays a lot of one-ofs, particularly the field spells, that we definitely need to make sure are in the deck before activating certain effects. So, I'm going to begin by activating the Bystial Lubellion, just kind of getting a feel for what and if any disruption my opponent might have. They're going to start with the preparations to establish the Unicorn on the board. I don't know why they didn't do that during the draw phase. They probably just didn't have their toggle held on, but if they had, then they would have been able to activate Unicorn's effect by now. Although they'll get to activate it soon enough to be fair either way. Opponent's going to go ahead and toss out the Maxx here. I'll play the Druiswarm in response, but I will say that I'm pretty committed to playing under this Maxx. It is absolutely my intention to win on this turn. So, going to be using the Absorouter Search Rokket Tracer. Here is the Kashtira Unicorn activating the effect. It looks like they end up taking the Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon. Definitely not a bad hit, especially going second. One of the ways that I like to play this deck going second in particular is basically trying to OTK with Accesscode Talkder, and I do often use Chaos Ruler in that combo line. It's good because not only do you get some extra extension with the Excavate and the Chaos Ruler bringing itself back, but also, well, the Chaos Ruler bringing itself back after being used as a material with the Accesscode Talkder often makes it very easy to get to 8,000 points of damage. I don't think that was a terrible hit, but I will say my opponent might have had a better one. Actually, I don't know. I'm looking and going second. You probably just have to either hit the Chaos Ruler, which I did, or the Accesscode Talkder. Yeah, I think it was a fine hit either way. But in any case, we're going to use Chaos Space to put back the Lubellion, mostly getting an extra draw here. The extra draw is just another copy of Wyverburster. I'm going to go ahead and summon that, link it off with the Romulous. We already have the Boot Sector launch, so I don't necessarily need the Striker Dragon first in order to search that. But I will definitely chain block the Romulous search here in an attempt to make sure that resolves. Opponent's going to have an Imperm for the Romulous. That's actually ultimately fine. Like, I would like to have had, I would have liked to have had, geez, say that 5 times fast, the Ravine here, but I don't need it. I definitely don't need it, so. Searching the Collapserpent off that Wyverburster, which I'll go ahead and summon, and then link off with the Romulous in order to play the Knightmare Unicorn. I'm going to be using this in an attempt to get rid of my opponent's last back row here, and they don't chain it, so that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm not really scared about Maxx at this point. Like, it seems like, you know, wow, Hex, you're giving your opponent so many draws. Like, even if you're going to try to win on this turn, isn't that going to be pretty risky to play through? One, no, because I'm making Borreload Savage Dragon here. That is actually going to be the additional body on top of the access code that I'm going to use to OTK. It not only has more than 3,000 attack, but it also acts as an Omni-Negate. But even up till this point, I'm really not particularly concerned about playing into a Maxx here because I'm going to win on this turn, which I already established, so I don't really care about my opponent having the advantage. And there's not really much in the way of disruption my opponent can draw to even stop me, right? They can't really use Ash Blossom to stop me. That doesn't really do anything to disrupt me here. Imperm they can't even use because they have cards on their field. And it's not really like Nibiru is that widely played in this meta. That could actually change, actually, with tier limits and Sprite potentially seeing less play. And this deck, Dragon Link, among others that are susceptible to Nibiru, potentially getting more popular, it might be worth playing more cautiously into Nibiru moving forward. But in this particular meta, I'm not really concerned about it. So, plus, like I said, we already made the Borreload Savage Dragon, so yeah. At this point, my opponent's just going to go ahead and concede, because at this point, as you can see, I have a pretty clear path to lethal on the board. And even if my opponent did find a Nibiru in those last couple of draws, we have the ability to negate it there. So that is a pretty typical going second game, I think, for this deck, or, you know, at least a pretty, what's the word? Ideal going second game for this deck. Normally, again, I would use Chaos Ruler in addition to access code to OTK, but even though it got hit with the Cashier Unicorn, we were still able to find lethal without too much trouble there. So there is our first duel. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one here. Alright, this one's going to be against a Numeron, the tried and true classic. I will say this to you, like, this game was in Master 1. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with playing Numeron in Master 1, but I definitely don't understand it at all. Kind of same with, like, Stun, right? I'm not really sure why people still play Stun when they've already hit Master 1. But in any case, this hand's really weird. So, it's Maxx, 2 Ash Blossom, and then double Quick Launch. Definitely not a very typical opening hand. I'm going to have to make use of both Quick Launches here in order to get my plays going. I'm also going to use Rokket Tracer's effect here to destroy the Quick Launch that is being activated in order to get the effect off. Now, this will notably lock me into only being able to summon Dark monsters from the extract for the rest of the turn. This will be able to, or this rather will cut me off from accessing the Dragunity Knight Romulous for the Ravine Search, the Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres, as well as the Baronne de Fleur. Those are going to be the 3 things that we're not able to summon. And particularly in terms of the Romulous, that's kind of a big deal. But here's the thing too, right? We already opened a double Quick Launch, so like, this is already going to be a pretty atypical opening line, and given what we have in our hand, it's not like we can use the combo line where we would normally go into Striker Dragon and then Romulous to make plays, because we would need another extender, which we don't really have. So this is kind of what I was saying in the deck profile earlier when I was talking about how the way that you open is super going to change what your combo line looks like. This hand is kind of the epitome of that. This is an extremely irregular opening hand, but just because it's irregular doesn't mean we do not have plays off of it. So, gonna pop the Quick Launch there with the Tracer, get the Romulus, or not the Romulus, the Recharger, and then Rokket Caliber off of the Tracer effect there. Gonna go and directly sink into the Chaos Ruler and see what we can excavate here. Mainly looking for Starliege Seyfert and or a baby Chaos Dragon, and we found both. I'm just gonna go ahead and directly take the Collapserpent here. Saronir lets me dump an extra Lubellion in the graveyard, which is nice. I can use Seyfert to wheel that Lubellion back into my hand, which will then allow me to discard it and then get an extra Bystial monster as well. The Chaos Ruler excavates will also very drastically change what your combo line ends up looking like. Again, especially if you find yourself going for Chaos Ruler during turn 1 in this kind of manner, which is already pretty irregular. So, excuse me. Going to use Magnmahut to set up the end-phase search. Use that to bring back the Lubellion. Lubellion setting up the Branded Regained. I want to do that before I banish off of the Collapserpent here. I can then use Striker Dragon to actually pop this Lubellion and then wheel the Caliber back to my hand, which could be summoned off of the Brute Sector launch. It could also be summoned off of its own effect. I could pitch it off this Chaos Space I just drew. We'll see where this combo line ends up taking us here. Collapserpent, of course, gets to add the Wyverburster. It's summoning Dharc here because, again, we are locked into Dark monsters, so we can't summon Romulous, but we can still potentially set up a bit of a line here. As you can see, I'm summoning the Caliber off of its own effects, and then using that to go straight into the Guardragon Pisty. Now I can link off the Wyverburster for my second Striker Dragon, and as you can see, even though we haven't used either of our field spells, we're actually at a point where we're about to summon the Borrelend Dragon, and we've already also summoned the Chaos Ruler as well. So, yeah, again, pretty irregular the way that we're doing this, but it doesn't mean that we're necessarily ending on a weaker board state. Going to utilize the Chaos Space here, pitching the Collapserpent to find the Lubellion. It's the only other thing I can find, even though we're not necessarily able to summon Lubellion here. Going to negate my own Chaos Ruler with the Borrelend, and then link it off with the Tracer that I summoned to have an IP on the board here. I then get to also bring back my Chaos Ruler with its own effect to have the ability to link it to the Knightmare Unicorn with the IP Masquerena during my opponent's turn. And we're ending on double Maxx, double Ash Blossom. Well, because I had to discard for turn, we only have one Maxx, but regardless, we have Maxx and Ash Blossom and Joyous going into our opponent's turn here. Opponent's actually going to utilize the Lava Golem to sack off our Borrelend and the IP Masquerena. That's brutal and definitely not what I was expecting. I will say that Dragon Link is particularly weak to Kaiju type cards, especially Lava Golem, because often your ending board state is just going to be Borrelend plus Borreload Savage Dragon. So to have those both sacked off for Lava Golem is definitely pretty huge. But here we can at least throw out the Baldrake, and we'll still have that in addition to the Chaos Ruler. But the opponent's going to imperm our Baldrake, which is definitely pretty brutal. Now they get to activate Network directly from the deck with the Numeron Gate there. Opponent does have their Numeron board. However, things are not actually looking as good for them as might seem here. So here's the thing, right? The opponent basically can't OTK me right now because of the way that Numerons work. The first one attacks at 1,000 attack, then the second at 2, then 4, and then 8, right? So they need to land that 8k attacker directly, especially in this situation where, you know, 1k and 2k obviously just end up crashing into my monsters. The 3k gets to battle over the Baldrake, and then I take 500 damage, but then the 8k monster has to battle over one of the 3k beaters, and I only take 5,000 damage from that. Meaning, as the board state currently stands, my opponent only inflicts 5,500 points of damage to me. Not only that, but they also have to destroy 2 of their Numeron monsters to do it, so they can't even link into like the Mega Collapse in the main phase 2 for a follow-up line. My opponent's going to try to remedy this by using Left Arm Offering to attempt to find limited removal, but we have the Ash Blossom, which means they are not able to resolve that. And that means my opponent pretty much can't do anything. They can't win this turn. They can't link it to anything after trying to do damage to me. They could link it to the Mega Collapse now, but that being their only play is pretty bad. And I actually don't know if we have an out to the Mega Collapse. Our opponent might not even play it, but regardless, they're just going to go ahead and concede from there. So, good stuff. Even though we did not open a very regular opening hand, we were still able to have quite the board going into it, and we even punched through Numeron and managed to avoid getting OTK'd there. So, good stuff. We still have a couple more duels to check out. Let's go straight into this next one here. Okay, so for our next game here, we're going to be playing against Kashtira Punk. It's a pretty hefty list. It's at 47 cards. Definitely not particularly regular for the deck, but definitely still interested to see how we fare going up against it in any case. Going to be taking the second turn here once again, and we don't open really any disruption except for the Magnmahut here. So no Maxx, no Ash Blossom. I'm going to have to hope that Magnmahut is going to be enough. Against Punk, it could be. If they are on a list that is more reliant on Chaos Ruler, then that could be the case where we get to banish that. However, being a Kashtira variant, they definitely don't need the Chaos Ruler. They typically don't go for it as often here. I think they actually do end up... No, they do go for the Jam Dragon Drive here. So yeah, no Chaos Ruler from our opponent here. So gonna have to use the Magnmahut more as an extender than as disruption in this particular case. If I recall correctly, they don't even... Yeah, they're gonna target the Sharakusai. Interesting that they didn't go for the Rising Carp line here, but it also makes sense, like, because they are not really able... No, I'm sorry, they are going for Rising Carp. I thought they were playing around it, or playing around the Ash Blossom and avoiding going into the Rising Carp as a result, but no, they are just going straight for it here. Doing a bit of an interesting line here. Summoning the Wagon for the Extreme Session, the field spell there. Going to be using that to summon a Punk monster directly from their hand. It looks like it is going to be the Foxy Toon. Foxy Toon and Zamin are sinking for, I imagine, Pap here? Yes, Psychic and Punisher. Definitely not the way that this deck usually plays on turn 1. Usually they want to set up the Amazing Dragon into the opponent's turn 1, so that way they can bounce multiple monsters. And then from there, they also have the ability to... you know, get another draw off of the Extreme GM session, potentially finding more disruption in hand when they go to activate the Sharakusai effect. Here our opponent has chosen to sit on Pap, which is not a bad play necessarily on turn 1, but I would definitely think you'd want to accompany it with another play here. If our opponent had actually opened a Kashtira monster, they would have gotten to end on Baronne plus Punisher, which would definitely have been a much bigger step up here. But here, without any actual like negation, I'm pretty easily able to play whatever I want here. Now, to be fair, it is actually pretty difficult for Dragon Link to out a Pep when the opponent has higher life points. But with that caveat in mind, we can simply just alleviate this issue by entering battle phase and making our life points lower than our opponents. Now, this will mean that we're not able to win this turn, but given that we can make sure our opponent ends on very few resources, we're going to pretty much effectively win this turn anyway. Excuse me. Because our opponent is going to more or less be in top deck mode once we're done with them here. They're going to try to summon a Saronir from hand, but thankfully we have a Bystial monster of our own, in this case Druiswarm, which I was planning on summoning anyway, as this is going to be how I get rid of the Pap during the battle phase here. So, going to activate the Ravine to send the Absorouter. We get a Rokket Caliber here. Moving to battle phase at this point, I'm going to crash the Romulous, and also want to point out that my opponent wisely elected not to activate Psychic and Punisher's effect. If they had chosen to do that, I could have just rammed the Druiswarm into the Pep and taken enough damage off of one attack to get my life points lower than my opponent's. In this case, though, I'm going to have to ram the Romulous in as well, which is annoying because it means I'm not going to get a Link 2 to use for plays moving into the main phase 2, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be having absolutely no plays whatsoever. Druiswarm is going to end up, you know, battling into the Pep there. My opponent is going to draw off the Wagon effect, so there is that, but I'm going to use the Levianeer to put back one of their cards. My opponent's just going to go ahead and concede at this point. I think this is a symptom of just being in Master 1. Had we actually been on, like, quote-unquote real ranked ladder, I think my opponent would have probably played that out, but to be fair, like I said, my intention was to pretty much get my opponent into a position where they were more or less in top deck mode. They did already have 2 cards left in hand, but those cards are also left over from their turn 1, so they probably don't have that much combo potential, and I probably would have used Knightmare Unicorn or some other random, you know, removal effect to get rid of the field spell. Definitely would have wanted to make sure the field spell is no longer on the board going into the opponent's turn, as that would have greatly enhanced their ability to play into their turn there. So, yeah, there's that game. We have one more to check out, though, so let's go straight into it here. And our final duel is going to be that other one against Pure Kashtira. I thought I had another game against them here. This is going to be shorter. Normally, I don't show one-turn games, but I wanted to show this particular hand and how we played through it. So here we already open the Ravine and the Absorouter, which is pretty interesting because normally we go into Romulous at some point during our combo, specifically to search Ravine, specifically to dump Absorouter to make sure that we have rocket monsters in hand for Boot Sector launch. But you know, when you don't have to do that, it greatly opens up what you're able to do during your turn 1 there. We also have both Chaos Space and Bystial Lubellion, which I think is pretty rad. I'm going to lead with Bystial Lubellion. I like doing this because this is pretty decent bait for the Ash Blossom here. Now we get to use Chaos Space and actually pitch the Absorouter for the White Dragon Wyverburster. Also pretty rad because it means we get to not only add and then have fuel for the Wyverburster, but we didn't even get the Tracer. We have the Tracer in addition to the Recharger in hand, which means our Boot Sector launch that we get off of Striker Dragon here is actually going to be able to add multiple, summon multiple monsters here, except that I made a pretty fatal misplay here. I actually chain blocked in the wrong order, and my opponent was able to use the Ash Blossom to negate the Striker Dragon. That's a pretty brutal setback, especially again, given, like I just said, that I have multiple Rokket monsters in hand, but it definitely doesn't mean that we don't have any plays moving forward here. Going to be summoning the Bystial Lubellion off of this Magnmahut that I just summoned here, and activating the Lubellion effect to set up the Branded Regained. I'm then going to link off my Striker Dragon and Bystial Lubellion for the Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres. Going to be then summoning my Black Dragon Collapserpent here, which will then proc the Branded Regained. The Chaos Dragon Levianeer draw was a really good draw here, actually, because now I get to put back one of my opponent's cards. I'm going to be summoning the Guardragon Pisty. Collapserpent getting linked off means I get to summon the, or rather add the extra Wyverburster. Now I'll link the Hieratic Seal and the Levianeer in order to summon the Triple Burst Dragon. Going for the Heavenly Seal there for a couple of reasons. You might be wondering why we didn't go for that over Romulous, given that, yes, we do already have Dragon Ravine in hand, but the Hieratic Seal can at least be used as disruption, or Romulous is kind of useless, so why not use Romulous, right? Two reasons that I mainly elected to go into the Hieratic Seal there. One, I didn't want to give my opponent the free information that I already have Dragon Ravine in hand, and summoning Romulous would do that because Romulous would not get procs to activate, which of course means that I already have the Ravine in hand. On top of that, if my opponent had some kind of disruption, I would definitely rather end on the Seals, which can act as disruption going into my opponent's turn, rather than a Romulous, which is not going to be able to do anything at all. So, going for the Triple Burst, and now we're able to go into our Borrelend Borrelend Dragon. It's just regular Borrelend Dragon there. Now we're going to be activating the Dragon Ravine and pitching the Rokket Tracer to send a Starliege Seyfert. Starliege Seyfert will get to wheel a Chaos Dragon Levianeer back into my hand, and my opponent's going to concede at that point. So ultimately, I was not able to set up the Rockets, which again was a pretty fatal misplay for the way that I chain blocked the Striker Dragon there. But despite that misplay, and despite getting impacted by it, we were still able to end on the Borrelend, and also in making that Borrelend, we were able to summon the Levianeer, and then from there actually shuffle back one of our opponent's cards. And again, had we not been in Master 1 and at a lower rank where people actually, you know, cared about playing games out or had more of an incentive to, I think we definitely would have seen our opponent actually play that out and not just concede early there. Again, I normally don't like to show one-turn duels, but I think that one actually had enough going on in it that it was justified in keeping there. So that's going to go ahead and do it for these games. I hope you all got something out of this video. Let's go ahead and just move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating. that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now, so without further ado, this is Hexlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.